Welcome, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here for another edition of Spill the Tea in 10 with me, Devin at La Libre Language Learning. Today's topic is something that I get asked quite often, but this one is actually from the Practical Proficiency Network members. This is a membership for teachers like you who are trying to integrate more proficiency into their daily teaching routine, but they don't want it to spill over into their home life. So it's a membership all about getting the support you need, as well as the mindset that you need to make sure that your work-life satisfaction, rather than the myth of work-life balance, stays on track. And in a workshop that we did on assessments, we went into a deep dive on how to do speaking quizzes because we got a lot of questions about it. So I thought, what better topic than that for a 10-minute tips? So let's roll right into it. Today's topic is speaking quizzes, how to do it and how they work best. And I've got my timer on so that we stay on track. Let's roll because we don't have a lot of time. So for speaking quizzes, number one thing to take care of off the bat is first, why speaking quizzes? Well, with speaking quizzes, I will tell you that you should be assessing as much as you can as a teacher and putting your attention and time and energy towards the things that will help your students reach the most important objectives, right? That, of course, just makes sense in theory, but in practice, it gets really difficult. What happens in a school environment is that we really focus on writing. We focus a lot on presentational skills. Not bad, not a bad thing, but it's overdone in a school environment because that's what is easy for us to do in a school environment, and many other factors we don't have time for today. But this is a language class. So our attention needs to equally, if not more, don't you think, go towards the other two modes, which is interpretive and interpersonal. Now, when it comes to interpretive, and that's when your students are looking at an authentic document or listening to you or listening to a native speaker other than yourself, whatever it might be, and gleaning information from it and trying to understand, comprehend, all that good stuff. That's something that teachers can do fairly naturally, no problem. But where it gets sticky is interpersonal because you get into a lot of logistical problems. Can I do any kind of activity with students doing speaking with each other? How can I make sure that students are staying in the target language for the speaking activity? How do I make sure that the speaking is being graded fairly? What should I focus on? Should I focus on pronunciation? Should I focus on errors? Blah, blah, blah. It gets really difficult. And not to mention that on top of all of these stresses, that it's difficult for you alone to maintain a target language and communicative environment, right? So that's where speaking quizzes fall in the mix of this. And that's why we're talking about this today, because speaking quizzes helps to address a lot of these things. Number one, it focuses your students' attention as well as your precious time and attention and energy towards the thing that matters most in your class. Arguably, my opinion, but that's speaking. It's a language class. So I would say that that's speaking. This is the hardest thing for us to incorporate, though. So a great solution for this problem is, well, let's assign more graded work with speaking. Ta-da! Speaking quizzes. When you assign more graded work towards speaking rather than interpretive or presentational, you're sending a strong message to your students that this is what you want them to really focus on. This is what you're going to do the most in class. Now, first way that this could go sideways is if you're assigning lots of speaking quizzes, but not a lot of practice to go with it. Here's what happens when you assign a lot of speaking quizzes. Naturally, your students need to prepare for the speaking quizzes, right? So guess what starts happening in your classroom all the time? Speaking activities, daily speaking quizzes start popping up in your classroom when speaking quizzes become a regular event. Not only does that happen, but students get used to the idea that your class is a speaking class, and they pay a lot more attention when it is time to learn about proper ways to speak. So I would encourage you to do this early and often. Some other things to avoid when it comes to speaking quizzes, because then you will get it in the wrong direction because this is not what it's for. What is a speaking quiz for? A speaking quiz's purpose is to make sure that your students are aware of how important speaking is in a language, how much they actually have in their heads and they're able to synthesize, but more importantly, what they're able to understand, because that's going to be much larger than what they're actually able to speak. So it seems odd, but what you actually need to do in a speaking quiz and the way that you organize and facilitate it is measure what they understand. Seems weird, right? But it's interpersonal. So it's not just presentational when you do a speaking quiz. You are looking for, did they comprehend the question? Which is, by the way, a really important novice mid skill, being able to both understand and respond to in short, concise ideas, practice language ideas, by the way, that they are able to respond to questions. That's a big deal. That's a big, big, big part of novice mid. So is being able to express basic needs, express opinions, and react to other people's opinions when you get to novice high. All great things that you can do in both speaking activities and speaking quizzes. So if you want your students to move up the language proficiency ladder, the more speaking activities and quizzes that you do, not only are you seeing what they can do with it, but you are really honing in on the heart of those skills and not dancing around them, which can sometimes happen with a lot of activities unintentionally. You're getting right to the heart of it real fast. It's very efficient. Okay, a huge don't with speaking quizzes. As we've set the stage for what it's for, it's to establish what your students can understand and what language they can synthesize in their heads and then produce, which is not much, right? Production is going to be real, real low. So you will completely deflate your students as well as defeat the purpose of these special tools of a speaking quiz or speaking assessment if you hammer home the need for accuracy. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this quiz, speaking quiz, whatever you want to call it, is not for your students to demonstrate how accurate they are with language in levels 1 through 3. The purpose is for them to show you how well they understand language and what they can produce back to you at the appropriate level, which guess what is not going to be accurate at novice low and novice mid. Can you grade them for communication instead? How many ideas did they give you? Ooh, did they give you a conjunction? Did they say, I like ice cream and pizza? Boom. Guess what that just did? That just moved a student up from novice low to novice mid, because using a complete thought instead of just listing things is a novice mid skill. So those are the things that you can look for and praise your students for. Errors does not mean difficulty. Like if you're looking for perfect language, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually a higher level language. More fluid language, more connected language, and honestly, just more language in general can often be a sign that your students have more in their heads. So be looking for that instead. Pronunciation also, you know as well as I do that levels 1 and 2 are going to sound ridiculous at all times, and that's okay. You are not grading pronunciation in levels 1 and 2. I would highly recommend not to do this. There's another video on pronunciation if you'd like to learn more. But the idea here is that they get a ton of practice actually using the language, because you're not only using a lot of activities, but you're grading it pretty often. So leave that off the rubric. And what you can do for students who actually pronounce things fairly well and who give you a good native lilt and effort, give them bonus points so that they are rewarded for their higher proficiency levels that they are striving for. That's amazing. But I wouldn't hammer home the idea of pronunciation either. It's more like if they say things like Jamapple instead of Jimpale, which I used to get a lot. Jamapple, nobody would understand. But Jimpale, even though it like makes my ears bleed, I know what that means. I know what Jimpale means. It means je m'appelle. That's okay. I know what that means. So yeah, boom. You did it, Jerry. Good job. You get a little check for that. So let's hammer home the point of these is for students to be more motivated to produce the language that's in their heads for you, which is messy at this moment in time for levels 1 and 2. At levels 3 through 5, you can revisit this idea, but it's going to be messy. It's going to be filled with errors, and it's going to have really interesting, we'll call it pronunciation, but you're measuring the amount of language that's coming out of them, and that's exciting. So that's where you're really going to hit the magic with speaking quizzes in here. The other thing to keep in mind for the purpose of speaking quizzes is that this is a great way to show your students how well they are doing. It is very difficult, even though this is technically the research-based way to do it. It is very, very difficult, I find, to explain to a student, hey, right now you're a sponge. You're not going to be able to say a lot. You might be able to understand a lot, but you're not going to be able to say a lot until we get to the end of the year in French 1. Like, can you imagine saying that to a ninth grader? I can. I've done it several times real vividly, and I can tell you it's completely up to you. But from a practicality standpoint, even though this is where the research is at, it's really disheartening for a 14-year-old to hear, I'm not going to say anything in class until the end of the year. That's really disheartening. So in my experience, it helps students move along the track if you give them very short 2 to 3 questions, very simple, really fun, easy graded speaking quizzes pretty frequently, like every 2 to 3 weeks, so that they get tons of practice with the pronunciation. They see that your class is about speaking, and they have a ton of fun doing a lot of partner speaking activities with each other. I mean, I don't even need to get into how good this is for their social skills. So the benefits far outweigh, for me, in my classroom context, you make the decision for level 1s, but for me, the benefits far outweigh the downfalls of them not technically having enough language to actually do much with speaking at this time. It's okay. You're expecting practiced, rehearsed language, and that's what you want at level 1s. That's what they're able to do at novice low, and that's fine. But it moves the motivation along. And guess what? SLA has found that motivation is the #1 time and time again factor for students of any age, of any background, of any talent level, of any bilingual, trilingual, multilingual background, sticking with a language. Motivation, #1, tops all. And students being able to say to their friends and family at home and show off at holiday parties what they can say in French class, instead of saying, I'm a sponge right now and I can't wait till level 2 when I can speak, it'll literally triple their motivation overnight. Like, trust me, it works really, really well. So utilize speaking quizzes to your advantage in lower level classes. I know a lot of people shy away from them because it can be more difficult to do, but I've got solutions for you. Don't you worry. Next week, join me again, same time, same place, 4 p.m. And we are going to talk about the logistics of how a speaking quiz really works and how you can use this in your classroom as a tool for all the things that we talked about, for boosting comprehension skills, interpersonal skills, social skills, motivation, everything, and a little bit more of these do's and don'ts to help you navigate what a good speaking assessment looks like in early levels of language. If you're teaching upper level students, then you can definitely even go further into depth with this and make them more interviews. But speaking quizzes is where it's at, y'all. I'm excited for you to start this. If you're ready to just start this right now, this week, here's what you need. 2 to 3 questions maximum about the current topic that students are learning about. See if they're able to understand your question first. You could even try this tomorrow in class. Give them 2 simple questions, 3 simple questions about the unit that you're doing in your classroom right now, and see if they're able to answer it on paper first. And if they're not, you know where to go. You know what it's time to do in class, and then move towards the speaking portion of that. Put them in pairs with each other, put them in little groups of 4 to practice, and you'll watch the magic happen. Do this consistently, and you'll see a huge improvement in the amount of response that you get when you use target language and when it's time for students to use target language, because it becomes a familiar everyday part of things, and in the gradebook, something that they're rewarded for. And isn't that what we're all striving for? So I hope that this tip was helpful for you to encourage you to start using speaking quizzes as a tool in your classroom for a lot of different things. It is technically an assessment, but it works in so many different ways to encourage all kinds of growth. So get after it. I can't wait to hear about how your speaking quizzes are going. And I will see you next week, where we're going to talk more about the logistics of how to do this. But go ahead and get started with it. And I'm signing off. This is Devin at La Libre, and I will see you next week. Bye for now.